The storm had passed, but what Thomas Blackwood discovered in his failing ranch defied all frontier logic. 3 Apache women lay unconscious near his dying cattle. But these weren't ordinary women. They were giants among their people, the shortest standing over 6 feet tall, the tallest nearly 8 feet of pure muscle and bone. Apache women this size were legends whispered around campfires. Warrior daughters who never traveled without war parties. But here they lay, bleeding and alone. What Thomas did next would either mark him as the biggest fool in the territory or reveal a strength that would change the frontier forever. Chapter 1. The Discovery of Giants. Thomas Blackwood stepped through the aftermath of the spring storm, surveying the devastation that had torn through his struggling ranch. Lightning had struck his water pump, and 3 of his precious cattle lay motionless near the creek bed. But it wasn't the dead livestock that made his breath catch in his throat. It was what lay beyond them. 3 women sprawled unconscious in the muddy earth, their massive forms unlike anything he had encountered in 15 years on the frontier. These weren't ordinary Apache women. They were giants among their people, each one towering above any settler Thomas had ever known. The smallest of the 3, she stretched nearly 6.5 feet in length, her powerful frame built like that of a seasoned warrior, despite her feminine features. The middle sister appeared even more formidable, her broad shoulders and muscled arms suggesting strength that could match any cavalry soldier. But the largest defied comprehension entirely. Nearly 8 feet of solid bone and muscle lay motionless before him, her imposing presence radiating authority even in unconsciousness. Their clothing bore intricate beadwork that marked them as highborn, the kind of ornate craftsmanship reserved for chiefs' daughters. Silver ornaments caught the morning light, their value exceeding Thomas's entire property. Blood stained their garments where branches had torn fabric during their desperate flight. Each woman carried weapons that spoke of serious training, knives crafted with the precision of master artisans, bows designed for hands larger than most men possessed. Thomas's survival instinct screamed warnings that had kept him alive through countless frontier dangers. Apache women of this stature never traveled without war parties. They represented the elite warrior class, daughters of powerful chiefs who commanded respect through strength and birthright. Finding them alone suggested catastrophic circumstances that would bring severe consequences for anyone involved. His mind calculated the risks with practiced efficiency. Helping Apache meant death if discovered by other settlers, who showed no mercy to those suspected of collaboration. His remote ranch offered some protection, but blood trails and evidence would eventually draw attention. Every reasonable instinct demanded he walk away, report the discovery to territorial authorities, and claim ignorance of their condition. Yet as Thomas studied their faces, weathered by wind and hardship, but bearing the noble features of Apache royalty, something deeper than survival instincts stirred within him. These weren't enemy warriors threatening his existence. 3 human beings had fled something terrible enough to separate them from their protection. The smallest giant's breathing came in shallow gasps that suggested internal injuries, while dark stains beneath the largest indicated serious blood loss. Standing over 3 fallen titans who could crush him effortlessly, Thomas realized that his next decision would define not just their survival, but the very essence of who he chose to be. Chapter 2. The Healing and the Hunt. Thomas dragged the unconscious giants into his cabin one by one, their immense weight nearly overwhelming his strength despite years of ranch labor. The smallest sister required maneuvering through his doorway sideways, her powerful frame barely fitting through the entrance. The middle sister's broad shoulders scraped against the wooden frame, while the largest demanded removing the door entirely to accommodate her massive proportions. Inside his cramped quarters, the 3 women transformed his modest living space into something resembling a battlefield hospital. Their combined presence dominated every corner, making Thomas feel diminutive in his own home. He worked methodically, cleaning wounds with whiskey and binding torn flesh with strips torn from his cleanest shirts. The smallest sister had taken something sharp between her ribs, possibly a broken branch during their desperate flight. Dark blood continued seeping through improvised bandages despite his efforts. The middle sister stirred first, her intelligent eyes focusing on Thomas with surprising clarity given her injuries. She spoke softly to her unconscious siblings in rapid Apache, then addressed him in careful English. Her name was Ayana, meaning eternal blossom, though her warrior bearing suggested thorns accompanied any beauty. Her sisters were Eatsel, meaning rainbow, and the massive unconscious form was Seatlali, meaning star. All three had fled marriages arranged to warriors known for brutality toward their wives. Through broken English mixed with gestures, Ayana explained their desperate situation. They had escaped during a hunting expedition, abandoning their escorts to avoid ceremonies that would bind them to men who viewed wives as property to be dominated through violence. Their unprecedented size made them valuable political assets, capable of producing similarly powerful offspring for strengthening tribal alliances. But their stature also made them targets for warriors who saw dominating giant women as ultimate proof of masculine superiority. Thunder rolled across the valley, not from approaching storms, but from horses moving at speed. Thomas peered through his window to see 5 Apache warriors positioned on the ridge overlooking his property. Even at a distance, their war paint and aggressive postures suggested they were hunting, not rescuing. These men had likely discovered the sisters' escape and followed their trail with deadly intent. Worse complications arrived within the hour. Federal marshals approached from the opposite direction, their badges glinting in afternoon sunlight. Marshal Davidson led 2 deputies, their presence indicating official business rather than routine patrol. If they discovered 3 Apache women in his cabin, territorial law would demand their immediate arrest regardless of circumstances. The sisters would face interrogation that could easily become torture, while Thomas would be charged with harboring fugitives. Trapped between Apache warriors seeking forced brides and federal authorities viewing all Apaches as potential threats, Thomas realized that sunset would bring violent confrontation from multiple directions. 3 giant sisters lay vulnerable in his cabin, while armed men closed in from both sides of an ancient conflict. Chapter 3: The Blood Debt Revealed. Marshal Davidson dismounted with practiced authority, his weathered face scanning Thomas's property for signs of the Apache trail his tracking party had followed. Behind him, deputies Carson and Mills spread out tactically, their hands resting on weapon grips with veteran caution. The marshal's presence meant territorial headquarters had received reports of Apache movement, transforming Thomas's isolated ranch into the center of official investigation. Thomas stepped onto his porch, positioning himself to block any view of his cabin's interior, where 3 giant sisters lay hidden. His heart hammered against his ribs as Davidson approached, badge reflecting sunlight like a warning beacon. Federal marshals possessed absolute authority in territorial disputes, answering only to distant Washington bureaucrats who viewed frontier complications as obstacles to civilization's inevitable advance. Davidson's sharp eyes immediately detected inconsistencies in Thomas's nervous demeanor. Blood stains on the porch steps, larger than normal footprints in the mud, and the unmistakable scent of medicinal herbs suggested recent medical treatment. The marshal had tracked fugitives across 3 territories, developing instincts that rarely failed him in detecting deception. Before questioning could begin, Ayana made a decision that changed everything. She emerged from the cabin voluntarily, her massive frame filling the doorway before stepping into the afternoon light. Even hardened federal officers stepped backward involuntarily, none having encountered an Apache woman of her imposing stature. Her nearly 7-foot height and warrior bearing commanded immediate respect, mixed with apprehension. Speaking with careful dignity, Ayana revealed information that transformed the entire confrontation. Thomas had rescued a drowning Apache boy from Willow Creek 3 months earlier, staying with the child until tribal members arrived to claim him. That boy was the youngest son of Chief Broken Hawk, leader of the most powerful Apache band in the territory. Apache law demanded blood debt recognition for such mercy, creating obligations that transcended normal settler tribal boundaries. Marshal Davidson's expression shifted from suspicion to calculation as he processed these revelations. Federal treaties with Apache tribes included provisions recognizing certain traditional laws, particularly those involving family obligations and blood debts. If Thomas could prove his rescue of the chief's son, and if these women were indeed Chief Broken Hawk's daughters, then territorial law became significantly more complicated. Itzel and Seetlali joined their sister outside, their combined presence creating a tableau of feminine power that defied every frontier assumption about Apache women. Standing together, they represented nearly 20 feet of trained warrior strength, their imposing forms making the armed deputies appear suddenly inadequate. These weren't desperate fugitives seeking charity, but Apache royalty claiming legal protection under ancient customs. As evening shadows lengthened, Davidson realized he faced a situation requiring delicate negotiation rather than simple arrest procedures. 3 giant daughters of Chief Broken Hawk stood under blood debt protection, while territorial treaties demanded respect for Apache family law. The marshal's next decisions would either prevent or precipitate the very conflicts his orders sought to avoid. Chapter 4. The Chief's Arrival. Dawn broke with the thunderous approach of horses, their hoofbeats echoing across the valley like war drums announcing Judgment Day. Thomas stood in his doorway, exhausted from a sleepless night spent watching federal marshals maintain their perimeter around his property. Marshal Davidson had reluctantly agreed to wait for Chief Broken Hawk's arrival, recognizing that territorial treaties demanded respect for Apache blood debt customs, regardless of his personal opinions about frontier justice. The riders emerged from morning mist like figures from an ancient legend. Chief Broken Hawk led 12 tribal elders, their faces painted with ceremonial designs that spoke of sacred business rather than warfare. The chief himself commanded immediate respect, his weathered features bearing the wisdom of 60 winters spent navigating the treacherous politics of territorial survival. His piercing gaze swept across the scene, taking in federal officers, his giant daughters, and the white rancher whose actions had created this unprecedented situation. Behind Thomas, Ayanna, Itzel, and Seetlali prepared for their father's judgment with stoic dignity. Their combined presence filled his cabin doorway, 3 towers of feminine strength awaiting whatever fate tribal law would decree. Each sister understood that their unprecedented flight from arranged marriages had created consequences extending far beyond personal choice, potentially affecting relationships between their people and territorial authorities for generations to come. Chief Broken Hawk dismounted with ceremonial precision, his movements calculated to demonstrate respect for both Apache tradition and federal authority. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of absolute leadership, commanding attention from every person present. His words, delivered in perfect English, revealed the disturbing message that had driven his urgent journey to Thomas's ranch. Ancient tribal prophecies spoke of 3 giant daughters born in the same generation, sisters whose combined strength could either unite the Apache bands or bring catastrophic division among the people. Medicine men had interpreted their unusual size as signs of supernatural significance, marking them as either blessed protectors or cursed harbingers of tribal destruction. Their simultaneous rejection of marriage alliances had triggered the prophecy's most ominous warnings about bloodlines that must remain bound together or risk unleashing devastating consequences. The chief's disturbing message revealed that the separation of the 3 sisters would fulfill the prophecy's darkest predictions. Federal authorities planned to transport them to different reservations for individual questioning, unknowingly triggering ancient warnings about scattered strength becoming destructive chaos. Tribal elders had experienced visions of warfare and suffering following any attempt to divide the giant daughters, creating spiritual obligations that superseded political convenience. Thomas found himself at the center of an impossible choice between federal law, demanding cooperation with territorial justice, and Apache spiritual beliefs, warning of catastrophic consequences. The chief's haunting message made clear that whatever decision emerged from this confrontation would determine not just the sisters' immediate fate, but the future relationship between two cultures struggling to coexist on an unforgiving frontier. Chapter 5. The Disturbing Truth. Chief Broken Hawk's weathered hands traced ancient symbols in the dust as he revealed the full extent of the prophecy that had haunted tribal elders for generations. The three giant daughters represented the final bloodline of legendary Apache warriors whose extraordinary size had once defended their people against impossible odds. According to sacred traditions passed down through countless generations, their ancestors had stood as living shields between Apache families and extinction during the darkest periods of tribal history. The disturbing truth emerged through the chief's measured words, each revelation more ominous than the last. Medicine men had interpreted the sisters' simultaneous birth as a sign that ancient protector spirits had returned to prepare for coming catastrophes. Their unusual stature served as a physical manifestation of supernatural strength, meant to preserve Apache culture through trials that would destroy lesser bloodlines. But the prophecy contained terrifying warnings about the consequences of separating such concentrated spiritual power. Thomas listened with growing horror as Chief Broken Hawk described visions experienced by tribal seers following the sisters' escape from arranged marriages. Dreams of warfare consuming entire territories, settlers and Apache alike dying in conflicts that would make current tensions seem insignificant by comparison. The prophecy warned that dividing the three giants would scatter their protective influence, transforming concentrated strength into chaotic destruction that neither culture could survive. Marshal Davidson's face grew increasingly pale as he processed the implications of federal plans already set in motion. Territorial headquarters had ordered the sisters' immediate transport to separate facilities for individual interrogation, a standard procedure designed to prevent coordination of testimony. Orders from Washington emphasized the importance of preventing Apache leaders from claiming these women represented anything more than common fugitives fleeing territorial justice. The chief's most disturbing revelation concerned timing that seemed orchestrated by forces beyond human understanding. Military reports indicated unusual Apache activity across multiple territories, suggesting that news of the sisters' capture had already reached distant bands. Tribal leaders traditionally opposed to cooperation were reportedly gathering warriors, interpreting any threat to Chief Broken Hawk's daughters as a declaration of war against all Apache people. Ayanna stepped forward, her massive frame casting shadows across the assembled men as she spoke with quiet authority. Her words revealed the sisters' own understanding of their burden, accepting responsibility for the consequences their choices had unleashed while refusing to surrender autonomy to prevent prophesied disasters. They had discussed the situation throughout the night, reaching conclusions that prioritized dignity over safety. Thomas realized that conventional solutions offered no viable path forward. Federal authority demanded compliance with territorial law, while Apache prophecy warned of catastrophic results from separation. The three sisters faced impossible choices between submission to marriages they despised and triggering conflicts that could consume the entire frontier. As the morning progressed toward an inevitable deadline for federal action, Thomas found himself formulating a desperate plan that would require unprecedented cooperation between opposing forces, challenging every assumption about territorial authority and tribal sovereignty. Chapter 6. The Unbreakable Bond. Chief Broken Hawk's solution emerged from ancient Apache traditions that federal law had never encountered, creating legal precedent that would reshape territorial relationships for generations to come. Standing before assembled officials and tribal elders, the chief announced his intention to invoke the sacred ritual of guardian brotherhood, a ceremony reserved for the most extraordinary circumstances requiring permanent protection of tribal bloodlines. The ritual would bind Thomas to all three sisters simultaneously, creating familial obligations that transcended normal adoption procedures. Unlike simple blood debt recognition, the Guardian Brotherhood established spiritual connections that Apache law considered unbreakable, conferring rights and responsibilities equivalent to those shared by birth siblings. Federal treaties acknowledging tribal customs would be forced to recognize such bonds, making any attempt to separate the sisters legally impossible. Marshall Davidson found himself trapped between territorial orders demanding immediate prisoner transport and treaty obligations requiring respect for legitimate Apache ceremonies. His superiors in Washington had never anticipated situations where federal authority conflicted directly with recognized tribal spiritual practices involving American citizens. The legal complexity created jurisdictional confusion that could take months to resolve through proper governmental channels. Thomas accepted the ritual's demanding requirements without hesitation, understanding that guardian brotherhood would transform every aspect of his existence. His ranch would become a permanent sanctuary for 3 giant Apache sisters, while his own legal status would shift from territorial settler to adopted tribal member with federally recognized rights. The ceremony would bind their fates together permanently, creating mutual obligations that death alone could dissolve. The transformation ritual lasted from sunset to dawn, conducted according to traditions older than territorial government itself. Sacred herbs burned throughout the night, while tribal elders chanted ancient songs that had blessed such ceremonies for countless generations. Thomas submitted to ritual scarification that would mark him permanently as guardian brother, while the 3 sisters accepted ceremonial obligations that bound them to his protection as family. By morning, the legal landscape had shifted irrevocably. Federal marshals found themselves powerless to separate family members whose bonds carried treaty recognition, while territorial authorities discovered that their jurisdiction over tribal customs remained severely limited. The 3 giant sisters had gained permanent sanctuary through a spiritual law that superseded political authority. Thomas's failing ranch transformed into a thriving trading post where Apache families conducted business under federal protection. The sisters' imposing presence deterred trouble from aggressive settlers, while their intelligence and strength made every aspect of frontier life more secure. Ayanna managed negotiations with visiting tribes. Eatsell supervised construction projects that expanded their facilities, and Seetlali's intimidating stature ensured that all visitors respected established boundaries. The disturbing prophecy had found resolution through unity rather than separation, proving that ancient wisdom sometimes offered better solutions than modern authority. The bond between Thomas and the 3 giant Apache sisters became frontier legend, proving that courage and honor transcend all boundaries. If this tale of impossible choices and unbreakable bonds captivated you, smash that like button and let us know in the comments which Wild West story you want to hear next. Subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss these incredible tales from America's untamed past. Your support keeps these forgotten stories alive for future generations.